This lesson is an introduction to the menu bar on the frame. The frame class implements the menu container interface, which means it has all the methods you need to add a menu bar across the top of the window of a frame. The only thing new here is the mechanics of the menu itself. Fundamentally, it's a collection of push buttons with callbacks. Here at the top of the class, we have the declaration of a couple of menu items that we will need to reach from more than one method, and there's also a reference to a file handler class. I'll show you what all these are for in just a minute. This code creates the new menu bar. This is the bar that goes across the top of the window and holds all the menu buttons. This menu bar is going to contain two pull-down menus. The two are inserted into the menu bar with calls to add. This call inserts the menu bar itself into the frame. Just as we had methods earlier that produce panels for insertion into containers, this method produces a single pull-down menu for insertion into the menu bar. It isn't necessary to do it this way. You can do the whole thing in one large block of code, but separating things out this way makes it easier to find and work with. In larger programs where the menu is going to be extensive, you might even consider a separate class that does nothing but create the menu. This is the pull-down menu itself. As tradition dictates, the first menu on the menu bar is named File. The rest of this method does nothing but construct individual items that go onto the pull-down menu. These three lines of code create an open menu selection. A menu item object is a special button that goes into a menu, but it is a button, as you can see, because it uses a call to add ActionListener to set up a callback. In this example, the ActionListener object is another class named File Handler. Finally, the add method of the file menu is called to insert the item into the menu. We now have a pull-down menu with one button. Now this is where the second selection is added to the menu. It's the same as the first, except this one has a shortcut key added. The key event named VKS, or Virtual Key S, is Control S. All of the keys are defined as static constants in the class KeyEvent. Anyway, this menu button is assigned the same action listener as the previous one was, and then it's added to the menu. The Save Add button is assigned the same shortcut key as the previous button, but this one has a second parameter passed to menu shortcut to indicate that the Shift key must be held down. That means the shortcut for this menu entry is Control-Shift-S. Anyway, it's also assigned its action listener and added to the menu. This call to set action command changes the action command that's passed to the action listener. It doesn't change the string displayed on the menu button. It only affects the string sent to the callback. Things other than buttons can be added to a menu. For example, you can add secondary menus and check buttons, or you can insert a simple little divider known as a separator. These are often used to group similar selection items together on a menu, or in this case, to set off the last entry in the menu to indicate that it's a bit special. The last button is added to the menu. The action listener for this button is not the file handler class like the other buttons. It's this object, which is also an action listener. It's common in a menu to have several action listeners and spread the menu responses around among them. At the end of the method, the file menu containing all of its buttons is returned to the caller. This method creates another menu in much the same way as the file menu was created. A menu object is created. It will be populated with buttons and returned to the caller. These two buttons, labeled Disabled and Enable, are added as the first two buttons on the menu. They're assigned to this object as the action listener. Now these two buttons are the magic words, and they're also added to this menu. And finally, the fully constructed menu is returned to the caller. Every button that has this method listed as its callback has its action command listed on the screen. The exit button does just what you would expect it to do. It exits the program. The Enable menu button executes this block of 2 lines of code, which sets the 2 menu items to be enabled. You may recall that these 2 menu items were declared outside the methods at the top of the class, and this is why we needed to be able to reach them from in here to turn them on. Every menu button starts out enabled, but these 2 buttons could be disabled if this button had been selected and the 2 lines of code executed. You can use Enable and Disable to turn these 2 buttons on and off. Here is the other Action Listener. This is just a dummy class that doesn't do anything. It doesn't even have a constructor. It does nothing other than display the word File Handler followed by the action command from the button. Here are all the buttons defined in the program, and a separator just above the exit button. Also notice that the Save and Save As buttons are annotated with the keyboard shortcuts that were assigned to them. As you can see, the magic words are working. If they are disabled, they can be enabled again, and they work again. And that's a general introduction to menus.